What's up, guys? So today on the podcast, we have Drew Weatherhead. Drew Weatherhead, you probably know him maybe by his page on Instagram, but if not, probably because he runs a meme page called Because Jiu-Jitsu. And so he runs that super popular page, tons of followers and everything else. And so that's where most people know him from. So he's on the podcast today. The podcast today, just a heads up to you guys, is going to be like far more like diving into philosophical ideas than our normal podcast, because he is, as he'll talk about, I mean, it's a pretty interesting story. He's kind of had to move away a little bit from jiu-jitsu. He still trains and everything else, but not in the same capacity. He's not as involved in the same capacity as he was. And so it's opened up some different avenues for things for him. And so he's got a book coming out has basically nothing to do with jiu-jitsu necessarily, right? And so we go into a lot of that kind of stuff. So I'm just giving you a fair warning. I'm sure a lot of you guys are perfectly fine with that, but I just like letting people know what you're getting into, because as we talk about in this podcast, people come to know people in a certain way, and we look for people for that thing. And then when they do something different, we're like, hey, what are you doing? Mm-hmm. You're not being the same person. And so I just want to give you a heads up that we're not going to probably be the normal jiu-jitsu people that we normally are.
I always enjoy these conversations. Like, they're always different. You get a little perspective into how people's minds kind of operate and how they think. And I don't know. I think it's fun. I think it's fun to get. It's a change of pace too, which is cool.
Yeah. So with that said, guys, thanks for joining us today. And also thanks to our sponsors for helping make the podcast happen. Charlotte's Web. If you guys have never checked out any of their products, I encourage you to go to Charlotte's Web's website, charlottesweb.com. The promo code that we have with them is Jiu-Jitsu20. That'll save 20% off the order. Again, I encourage you guys to try their stuff out. It's a great tool, I think, for most people for recovery. But again, everybody's body's a little different. Everybody responds to supplements differently. So I always encourage people to try it out and see how it works for you right now. And if you guys have been listening to the podcast for any length of time, my nighttime rituals have changed. Right now, the nighttime ritual, involves the CBD, right, as part of the nighttime sort of wind down recovery stuff. But also I add in a little bit of theanine and a little bit of ashwagandha root. And those two things tend to help chill me out a little bit. And then sometimes, like every now and then, I'll throw in a little bit of GABA. GABA,
okay,
which can help with sleep. I don't do it every night, but occasionally, like once a week or something. And so those things have been really helpful about like especially just chilling me out, relaxing me, and helping me get to sleep better and having a lot like longer, more restful sleep. Like I actually had a sleep study done recently.
Right.
I do not have sleep apnea.
Good.
I know, it's great.
Excellent.
So I'm not killing myself in my sleep. I'm not suffocating.
Like choking yourself in your sleep.
That's it. So, but anyway, check out their stuff. Again, if you find something you want to save 20%, Jiu-Jitsu 20 for 20% off the order. Also, thanks to Matt at Epic Roll for sponsoring the podcast, a longtime sponsor. If you guys have ever been on his website, epicrollbjj.com, there's a ton of cool stuff on there. Everything from rash guards, shorts, shirts. Again, I really like the shirts and stuff. If you watch my YouTube channel, if you ever see me with a non-Jiu-Jitsu shirt on, it's either probably his shirt or someone's gym I've been to at some point. That I typically wear, those shirts most often. But again, I like his stuff. It's good quality. It's nice. I like the designs. The designs are typically, not all of them. He's got some flashy ones, but most of them are pretty minimalist. Yeah. They're pretty simple designs, and I enjoy them. So again, if you guys want to check out some of his stuff at epicrollbjj.com, and if you find something you like, the promo code to save 15% is Chewjitsu, CHEWJITSU, and check them out. Also, thanks to our sponsor, Manscaped. Manscaped.com is the website. Again, if you guys have never checked out Manscaped before, I'm sure you've heard about them. They're kind of everywhere right now. They are the premier men's grooming company. They have everything from trimmers. They started off originally, I think it was like a ball thing. It was like trim your balls. Everything was about balls, right? And which again, I was pretty I didn't really want to talk about that, but they do make a good ball trimmer.
Such a prude you are.
I know, right? I'm a product of my times, but they've come out with all these different products since then. And most recently, they came out with a beard trimmer. So the beard trimmer is pretty cool. So it has an adjustable guard on it, which I think is pretty handy if you guys have ever had to trim your beard. And a lot of times you understand you have different lengths you don't just trim your beard with one length. You have to trim it slightly different lengths, shorter in certain areas, longer in others, most of the time if you want it to be kind of shaped up. And then you have to change those guards out and everything else. It's kind of a pain. Well, their beard trimmer is just an adjustable guard, and again, it's wireless, so it's nice. It's wireless. You don't have to have a cord or cordless. I guess you say cordless. Wireless makes it sound like it's like a phone or something, but cordless. But
I get it. I know
you know what I'm saying. It's cordless.
Still the same thing. It does not have a wire, so I think both definitions apply.
But it's a good product, and so everything I've used from Manscaped has been like premium quality stuff. It works really well. I've always been impressed with it, and the beard trimmer was no different. And again, so if you guys are a man or you know a man in your life that would like some of the stuff that Manscaped has, check them out at manscaped.com. The promo code is Chewjitsu20 for 20% off the order, and you get free shipping. And guys, last but not least, if you want to support the podcast directly, you can do so by going to our Patreon at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast, along with a couple of bonuses that we give away to you in the beginning. You also get access to some exclusive content that we've made over the last several years, including a special segment with each guest that we've had on the podcast. So you can get access to it there at the Patreon. Also, guys, if you want to get access to a new program I created with my my coach, my nutrition coach. We just released it at the time of recording this. And if you go to my website at chewjitsutraining.com, so Chewjitsu, CHEWJITSU training.com. If you go there, you should see it on the front page. There we have it. It's called the Swollen Roll program. And basically it's taking some of the ideas, some of this hypertrophy style, bodybuilding style training that I've been doing over the last several years that I've really enjoyed. That's allowed me to train, to lift a lot. That's allowed me to train without my joints being banged up from heavy strength training, and also bringing a certain amount of stability to my certain joints, like my knees and shoulders and stuff like that, along with some different ideas on balancing training and recovery and everything else. And so we put it all into one program. Again, it's available at my website at chewjitsutraining.com. So if you want to get it, head over there now. And again, if this is close to the time around in the month of March, if March 2023, if you want to get the program during its early release, the early release ends at the end of March. The early release will allow you to get it at a cheaper discount. And also you'll be able to give me some feedback on basically what you think about the program. And at the end of it, I'm going to be choosing one lucky member to actually come down and fly here and train with me and actually meet Eli in person. The person that we choose it will only be someone that's in the continental United States. Just a heads up on that. So if you're European or something like that, not this time around, maybe in the future. And so guys, with that said, let's jump into the podcast and let's talk to Drew Weatherhead. Go back and look at old videos or old pictures of like Elio for like the times. Elio he was in pretty damn good shape. Like, oh yeah, he was a badass fighter, and like he had big old square jaw, and he's fairly tall. Like Carlos is actually really small if you looked at him.
Yeah, he is. That's right. Yeah, a lot of people forget about that.
Yeah, Carlos was the tiny one.
He was. A lot of people, I mean, look, the Gracies did a ton for jiu-jitsu, obviously, but maybe the greatest thing that they did for it that a lot of people don't give them the credit for is the marketing.
Sure.
The only reason it's alive today is the marketing. It wouldn't have survived the over 100 years of legacy otherwise.
Right. And that's an important thing, because, you can have a fantastic product, but if nobody knows about it, then there's nothing there. And again, regardless of whatever, the Gracies did an amazing job with it. And we're talking here today in part because of them.
Yeah, big time.
So how's everything going, bro?
Pretty good, dude. I'm out here in Texas and podcasting from my truck.
Yeah, you finally got to leave. I think the last time we talked, Canada was still doing the mandatory, like you got to go to the hotel after you come back, and they charge you a crap ton of money and everything else.
Yeah, it's been a absolute shit show for the last 3 years. I mean, around the world, but Canada has definitely been a standout for a lot of reasons within that.
Yeah, well, I guess it's one of those things where, like Canada, we feel like Americans kind of feel like you guys are like our it's like almost like there's like a little brother or sort of family relationship, like our brother or cousin or something,
Yeah,
And
the Maple Leaf State.
What's that?
The Maple Leaf State.
The Maple Leaf State. Yeah, right. And so we, but there's a lot of differences with us and you guys, with like things that you guys have rights to and versus not have rights to. But I'm glad everything's back to normal. How are you enjoying the States?
Oh, great. Actually, we're just coming to the end of this particular run. We can stay for about 6 months at a time, and then we go back for 6 months. We sort of just bounce back and forth because we live mobile in our RV. So we just follow the weather around North America more or less throughout the year.
Nice. Now, did you sell your gym up? Did you drop your gym or someone else running it now back
Yeah,
home?
so I had to end the gym up there. A whole lot of reasons to do with COVID and mandates and restrictions and
Hmm.
money. But I ended up passing the program off to at that point one of my purple belts, who's a brown belt now, and he's continued it on his own dime, kind of as a hobby project since then, and it's starting to pick up again, which is nice.
Nice.
Hmm.
Nice. And then you recently wrote a book.
Hmm.
And so that book, where did that come about? Because again, I haven't looked up into it a bunch, but tell me more about it, like where it kind of sort of came about from.
Sure. Well, you could probably attest to a lot of this because I know you're quite the philosophical thinker yourself, both from me listening to your own musings as well as stories of having conversations with mutual friends, being like, "Man, Chewy went off on this tangent that I didn't even realize he knew about. He knows about all this history and geopolitics and has like all these interests that are outside of jujitsu." But this is the thing: is most people forget that even black belts, they have interests that are outside of jujitsu,
Sure.
and through my own podcast, which I've been doing for about the last year, I've just had so many different really fascinating and eye-opening and paradigm shifting conversations with fascinating people that come from different lifestyles, different uh, paradigms, different cultures, religions, the whole thing. And all of these different ideas basically took up residence up top in my dome for the last year and have been bouncing back and forth. And interestingly, what humans are really good at is pattern recognition. We tend to chunk data over time. And the more
Hmm.
data you add to that system, the more experiential output you get that you may not expect. Stuff that is it seems like it's out of left field, except for the fact that it really is the addition of like 12 different nodes of information put together and they harmonize in a strange way.
Hmm.
So, in that spirit, I ended up writing a book that is based around three of the maybe the most universal major human conversations that it is to be a human, and that is consciousness, reality, and purpose. And that's simply the name of the book. It's very straightforward. I have three sections to the book that go in that order. We do 9 chapters on consciousness, 9 chapters on reality, and 9 chapters on purpose. And the goal of it, like I can get into the why I wrote it later, but the goal of it is really to open up these conversations to other people so that they can allow their brains to play around in that sandbox.
Hmm.
Nice. So you said you had some paradigm shifts. So maybe if there's one off the top of your head, is there something in mind? Like when you say you had a shift, it's like something sort of changed in you from having these conversations. Was there anything in particular that you can think of off the top of your head that was a big shift in your life, in your
Oh
thinking?
man, there's stuff in all three of those major categories, and what's interesting about it is they tend to lead to the next. Like you start looking into consciousness, and then it starts you thinking about reality, and then you start to find your place within it, which leads to purpose. And man, there are interesting paradigm shifts that happen throughout all of those. So, consciousness was an interesting one that I've always been pretty interested in. I've listened to a lot of different philosophers and psychologists and even neuroscientists talk about what they think consciousness is. And the
Mhm.
fact that at this point in 2023, with all of the technological and mathematic and philosophical endeavors and advancements we've had over however many thousands of years at this point, nobody still knows and can confirm what exactly consciousness is, except for that we have it, which is a
Mhm.
fascinating conversation to have. And so I go
Mhm.
into a whole bunch of different looks at that, things like dualism. So Rene Descartes' idea of the separation between mind and body.
Sure.
Um, you can go into mindfulness meditation from there. I know Sam Harris is a big proponent of that, where he talks about turning the spotlight of consciousness upon itself to witness that thoughts seem to arise as if out of nowhere. Like
To be the watcher.
yes, there's no thought that preempts a thought. So where exactly does that thought come from? Fascinating conversations like that. We go down AI constructs and what is or isn't consciousness. Could they be conscious at this point? Can they be conscious in the future? And all of the both scientific, mathematical, and philosophical, even some theological aspects to if that's possible and what people might be witnessing right now. Free will debates. We go into all sorts of really interesting things that if these are topics that resonate with anybody, which I don't know how anybody couldn't find these things interesting. To me, they're just human things, and so I left them all open-ended, and every individual chapter within 27 chapters is all kind of a sub-focus on one of those things within those major categories.
So what's consciousness to you? What would you describe? Like, how would you provide a definition, or even, we always kind of talk about like, are we in the matrix kind of thing, right? Are we really truly awake or conscious? So what would you describe as consciousness for you, and like maybe something that brought you closer or more aware of your consciousness?
That's a really good question. It's one I always forget to start these conversations with, is defining your terms. Because when people hear the word consciousness, it itself is kind of like a nebulous term that doesn't define a specific thing. Some people may consider consciousness whether you're awake or not, or they may think of like the metaphysical is like how awake are you to reality. But really consciousness, um, at least in most conversations that you're going to hear philosophers and neurobiologists talk about this in, is something to do with the awareness of existence. So they'll use terms like experiential qualia. You'll hear words like intentionality, and they'll be differentiating between what it is for something to exist and then what it is for something to know that it exists and have experience within that existence. So, for instance, there's a philosopher by the name of David Chalmers who really nailed this in a way that opened up that whole thoughtscape since about 1999 when he put out a paper that, in his words, defined the difference between the mechanistic side of existence and the experiential side of existence, where he categorized them into two things. He called the easy problems of consciousness and the hard problem of consciousness. And the easy problems are all the mechanistic things. And it's not to say that we even have them all solved, but essentially it's all of the biology, all of the mechanisms, all of the processes that's necessary for us to exist. And his determination is, even if you knew them all and could repeat them all in a laboratory, you still would be left with the hard question of why there is consciousness at all. Because the basic derivative mechanistic side of it doesn't necessitate any experience whatsoever. And this comes back to the whole catch-22 of whether or not AI can or is sentient right now, because we have all the mechanistic hows and the whys. We built these things. What is missing from them, or what is provided through this mechanism? Do the easy questions answer the hard question or not? And again, we're stuck at this point where we just don't know why there is experience, except for we know that individually we have experience.
That's a lot to take in.
Sure.
I'm just like trying to, I'm just trying to like figure out, like, as you're answering that question, what's consciousness to me, right? And like, I think part of it is like being present, like in the moment, kind of being aware of what's going on. I think that maybe is something, maybe that's my simple definition of it in some capacity. Like, I think maybe jujitsu, we all do jujitsu, and that's something that has a pull for all of us. And I think like, I feel more present when I do jiu-jitsu, because you have to be focused on what you're doing. Otherwise you're gonna get, the shit choked out of you. Yeah. And so you have to be aware and be present there. And I think that kind of, in some capacities, helps us be more conscious as well. I don't know.
One of the thought experiments in this space is they will ask, if you want to try to, the problem with consciousness, because we can't define what it is for sure, is that the best we can do is ascribe it to other things. So you can look at something and you ascribe whether you think it has consciousness or not. Usually it's a subconscious thing that we think that, this dog is conscious because it's acting like we would think a conscious thing would act. And then the thought experiment is, the best case scenario, or the easiest way to try to differentiate, because it's a nebulous thing to do, is, do you think that there is something that it is to be a thing? So if you were to pick up a rock and say, do you think there is something that it is to be this rock? Probably not. At least it's something that we can't, there's no analog in our brain to what it is to have an experience as a rock. But if there was a bat in a cave, yeah, I can probably assume or ascribe that there is an experience that it is to be a bat. So that bat is probably conscious.
So when you said you were talking also about consciousness and also purpose. When it comes to purpose, it's always an interesting thing, right? Like, people, this is, I mean, because we talk about all the technological advances and everything else, but when you really think about it, we go back to the same questions, philosophical questions that have been asked for thousands of years, right? Like, for instance, like, what is the purpose of like human life? And that was always an interesting one to look at. Have you ever read like Camus, The Myth of Sisyphus?
No, I haven't. Go ahead.
So I always like that one. So, because again, we live in a world that in a lot of cases is largely, no longer has religion. I mean, it's in some places, but we have a world that now is religion has been either extinguished and gone away from people's, or sometimes maybe you have like pseudo religions where it's no longer a religion of a god, but a religion of a particular movement that someone's a part of, and they've exchanged it for that. But the purpose of like, what are we doing here? In Camus' work, this Myth of Sisyphus, I really like. I found it useful because basically ideas about the Greek myth of Sisyphus, where Sisyphus was, punished to basically by the gods to have to push this boulder up to a hill, and then every time he gets to the top of the hill, the damn thing falls back down, and this is their punishment for eternity, to just push this down. And essentially, Camus makes the idea that if we're not willing to commit suicide right now, then there must be some reason why we're doing this thing, right? Like there has to be something we're going for, and that we have to see ourselves like Sisyphus, and there has to be a reason why we're pushing the rock up the hill. And that, I think then we can all find that purpose, and it can be different. And I think that that's one of the at least for me, it can at least make for a very meaningful life where you can find a purpose. Like, why are you here? What are you doing? What's something that brings you meaning? And I think like Joseph Campbell, like he would always say, like, you give life its purpose. There's no reason, there's no purpose for our life. We're just, what was it? Alan Watts would say we're basically tubes. Like, again, we put one food into this end or whatever, and then it comes out this end. We're these tubes, and eventually the tubes wear out. And then for some reason we think it's very, very important for us to make more tubes that then do the same thing. And then we just keep going. Right.
Yeah.
But we ascribe meaning to our life and purpose to our life. And what are your thoughts on purpose?
This is why I left the book off on that section. I really wanted to end it with that because it feels like that is a topic, a major human topic that people want to try to get an answer for, and nobody can give somebody an answer for what somebody else's purpose is. So it's a lost cause to do that. So why would I write about that? It's because I want to lead people to the starting block so that they can find their purpose. Because again, it's an audacious thing to try to presuppose I can tell somebody else what their purpose is. I can tell people things that I and other people have found to help them lead them towards their purpose. And I truly do believe that every single person has not just a purpose, but many different purposes that they can choose from. And to not pick one up is like sitting on the starting screen of a video game and not pressing start. Like you can sit there your whole life and just die. But there are so many other things that you could be doing if you actually take up a purpose. So to get to that starting block is everything. I love that you brought up Alan Watts because he was a really interesting philosopher back in the 70s that talked about a lot of the Eastern philosophies and theologies. And he had a great analogy that I know Jordan Peterson has used lately too. He said that if you go to a symphony, the goal isn't to listen to the last note. Like it's not to get to the end. You wouldn't feel fulfilled if you sat down, they played the last note and you left. The goal is the experience of existing through the entire experience to get to the last note. The last note only matters because of the experience that led up to it. And in fact, it matters less than the entire experience as a whole. So to speak back to meaning, Alan Watts would say that meaning is in every moment of existence. There is no meaning for existence. Existence is the meaning that you have by experiencing it.
Yeah, and I think that's something too that I just did a video talking about the same idea that'll be posted soon, which people come into jiu-jitsu, for instance, and we've got into this weird place in our society where like everything has to be about productivity, production, and like what do I get for this at the end? And you'll see people where they'll listen to audiobooks on 3 times the speed and they're just buzzing around, and it's like, did you even understand anything they said? Were you, if it's a book that's supposed to give you some knowledge, were you able to implement it afterwards? Like people say, well, I read this many books a year. It becomes almost egotistical where it's like, I've got look at all the books that I've read, look what I've done. And in jiu-jitsu you see the same thing where these people are coming in, they're complete hobbyists. They're just people that are training for fun and for enjoyment or whatever. And then they're like, okay, how do I maximize my ability to improve and blah, blah, blah. Whoa. Like, why are you trying to maximize anything? Why aren't you just playing? Right? Because again, this is just fun for you. You're not trying to be the world champion. You're not trying to be this thing. Like, why do we have to have something to show for it? Right? Like you said, we're not in a rush to like stop jiu-jitsu. We're not in a rush to get to the end of it and say, here's what I got for this thing. You wouldn't go to have a great dinner with friends and say, I'm waiting to get to the last bite and when I'm leaving.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. You're supposed to like find some enjoyment out of that experience in the moments that you're going through on a day-to-day basis, moment by moment.
Yeah, and there's so much power to the realization of that I've been plugging it in more and more into my daily life. I try to do it as often as possible. I try to like make it maybe every 5th or every 10th experience that I have during any part of any given day. I take a second to just enjoy it and be thankful that I'm having it, because it's always easy to be thankful for things after the fact, retroactively, looking back and having catharsis or having nostalgia. And it's like, why didn't I enjoy that while it was happening? Because I wish I could re-enjoy it right now. But right now, I've got other things I'm going to wish I could enjoy in the future. We're so myopic on this stuff. And the understanding of being glad or grateful that you have an experience at all, even if it's a bad one, which is a crazy thing to say because there's a lot of people suffering out there. But speak back to Watts, he said, I wish that we could set up hospitals in a way that people could take the value of the suffering, the experience of their suffering, because it's actually a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I think you always want to get, I mean, that's what you're taught, right? It's like to get to the end, to complete a task. And once you complete it, we've talked to so many, high level jujitsu athletes on this podcast. And it's like, there's always that, like, almost like the emptiness after completing the task. So it's like, if they had maybe appreciated the process a little more, it could be a little more fulfilling once you get to the end, essentially. Cause I think it's all part of the process.
Yeah. Yeah. That if I didn't really answer your question, Chewy, so I'm going to get back to it, where you're asking about how people find purpose or meaning, or people that are looking for it. I came across this thing. It happened randomly one day. So all of this stuff that I'm going to talk to and that I've written about, most people kind of know through cliches and through tropes, but it becomes much more powerful when you start implementing it. And one day I was sitting down on the side of the road, and I was looking down into the gravel, and I noticed one single solitary ant walking through the gravel. And whatever I was doing at that time, it captivated me. It stopped me, and I was watching this one single ant walk around. And it was strange because there was a paradox happening in front of my eyes, because I looked at this thing that was an individual creature that I know is part of a superorganism, it comes from a colony where they have built something that is an absolute architectural marvel as far as insects are concerned. It with its colony has unwittingly built something complete with air chambers and queen's chambers and things that act as a functioning society, while at the same time knowing that no individual one has any idea architecturally how to do that. And as I'm watching this thing, I'm trying to figure out what's going through its head. Does it know that it's part of this thing that is building this massive architecture? Probably not. I don't think that it has the capacity to do that. But I'm watching it walk around endlessly, feeling around, looking around. I don't know what it's doing, but what I realized in that moment looking at it was there has to be something that is driving this thing to do something, and just to do anything that builds this massive, incredible architectural thing in the process. And I don't think that it's something as simple as instinct. I feel like no matter what that ant is doing at any given time, he is trying to go towards the thing that he wants the most. So there's something in the mind of an ant that is always looking to do the thing that it most wants to do. And by leading itself and following its path towards the thing it most wants to do, it ends up building the society of an entire superorganism of creatures that are doing the same thing. And it's this crazy fractal reality of realizing that individuals in the superorganism that is the human race on planet Earth, they think that they're all individuals and they act as individuals. But I think as we start to work towards our own mind of the ant and starting to honor the things that we most want to do, we'll start to create something beautiful that then starts to fractalize throughout society and build something that it has to be done as a society, but starting grassroots as an individual.
We said instinct, but I mean, when you think about a lot of things with, like, say, even like the activities that we do, the feelings we have, all that stuff, so much of that comes from what we would consider, maybe the subconscious or the body and things like that. It's not as part of our like active thought in the neocortex, right? So we're not having an active thought to think about this. It's just coming from us. We have a drive to do this or that. You see certain animals where coming out of the womb, they can walk and run, very, very quickly, or humans do certain things very similar. You look at even like civilizations throughout history, like they do like the same thing over and over again. Even like civilizations are separated by like, all these different barriers that would mean that they didn't have a way to communicate with one another at a certain point, but yet for some reason they all do the same thing. They run very similar forms of government. They have certain forms of activities and rituals that they do, and you see this similar stuff. And so I always thought about this too, like, in our DNA, right? Is there some sort of coding that basically like says here, like just like an ant, right? Okay, here's your DNA coding. Boom. This is what you'll do for the most part. It's wired in you, and you'll continue to do this as soon as you become a being, a creature, right? And then with humans, do we have that same thing where we have this DNA that will then like make us do X, Y, and Z, and then these things sort of they blossom in very similar ways across the board, irregardless of the civilization that that they're a part of. It's simply just it's baked into us.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, like when I always think about that, I think that sometimes we maybe, I don't know if it would be instinct, but we sometimes we give the thinking brain a very like large place, and as it should, in our sort of thinking of how important it is. But so much is sort of just automatic. So much of it is basically just the subconscious going. Even our jiu-jitsu, a lot of times you can think about this. Like when you train jiu-jitsu, like at a certain point, you're a black belt. You don't go off of like thinking constantly. There's some thinking going on, but a lot of the stuff has just become wired into your body, and you just do it on autopilot. You're not thinking about every move. You're doing all this other stuff on autopilot. And then there's this higher level of thinking that then becomes available to you. So I don't know. I just, like you were saying, the instinct thing, and I don't know if maybe it's instinct or subconscious or whatever, but I think a lot of that you see with creatures down to the insects up to the humans. It's just there. It's baked into us.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting conversation, like all these things are that I love talking about. And there's a whole debate that's been going on for the better part of the last 200 years called nature versus nurture. And so this is in the psychological and the psychiatric worlds, is they always are trying to figure out which has predominance and which is more important, and how can we adjust one over the other, vice versa. And really, when they hear, I think the terminology is cute and it's good marketing, nature, nurture, it sounds good, but they're misnomers. They're much easier to understand as genetics or your predispositions at the biological level. That would be the nature side, and nurture is like environmental impact upon that creature. So as it stands right now, that debate is kind of at an impasse where they considered, broadly speaking, depending who you read and who you talk to, they believe that nature accounts for 49% of a person's personality, and nurture accounts for 51%. So they have a slight democratic majority on the nurture side. And so a lot of people, like the parents out there, think that, yes, this is a win. I can actually help affect my children. But actually, nurture has almost nothing to do with parental oversight. They have almost no say in the nurture side of someone's personality. It's almost entirely peers and traumatic events. That's mostly what causes the effect of the nurture side of someone's personality. And so when you're talking about things like instinct, that would be on the genetic side. These are things that, we're scared of the dark. People are scared of snakes. People are, these are things that have been, morphed into us over time, however much time. Sometimes it may have taken hundreds of generations. Other times it could be within a single generation through epigenetics, which you don't have to talk to right now. It's kind of like a subtopic. But what's interesting is when people, part of what I go into in the purpose portion has a lot to do with, I start the entire book off a single quote, and it's a 2-word quote that's thousands of years old. And it came from Socrates, and he says, "Know thyself."
Yep.
And it is maybe the most important entreatment that's ever been given to man. And to know thyself, you have to understand what both sides of your personality account for, and what is most likely going to be the actuaries within each. Is what are you genetically predisposed to? Do you have a predisposition to narcissism, to psychopathy? To some people are just born with a bad deck of cards, and they have to account for that as part of who I am. And I can't change that because that's genetic. But then a lot of it on the nurture side, what's interesting about the nurture side is that it's completely malleable by definition, because things get nurtured through or onto you through environmental impact. So your environment can nurture changes into you. People will change their personality to try to fit a peer group, or to try to get a job, or to try to do something that they think is going to be advantageous to them as a person. But what's interesting is that a lot of people don't recognize the things that have or have been nurtured into them over time that were detrimental. But what's cool is when you do figure that out, when you know thyself and figure out the things that are detrimentally part of your personality, you can nurture them out of you. You can
Mhm.
take the reins over your psychology. And this is what the whole realm of psychiatry is all about, is trying to undo the damages of lived experiences, whether they're traumatic events or peer pressure, try to bring somebody back to what is more naturally who they are, which speaks, I think, more towards the nature side of what are your natural proclivities. Try not to build a nurtured side of your personality that fights those natural things, and try to build it in a way that can honor the natural side of who you are, who you most authentically are, while still understanding the bad parts of it and trying to minimize those.
Well, I think that's one of those things where you've got to be really willing, because it's a tough road to go down, right? Like a lot of people don't really want to look at themselves, and again, we're all subjective a bit with ourselves, but you want to try to be as objective as you can with looking at yourself and, sort of saying, well, this is what I do really well. Here's where I'm screwed up. This over here is all conditioning. I believe this, but you know what? This is all conditioning that's been wired into me from the day I was born. And, but if you can go down that road, you can start to sort of, in my mind, harness yourself in a certain degree. You can say, well, who do I want to be?
Yeah.
Right. Like you can start to decide, because again, like if you can let life and you can let the society around you take you wherever you want to. And like you said, you have certain proclivities, certain predispositions, and then those get activated or turned on or turned off depending on what's going on. But then you can start to look at it. And if you can get deep enough into yourself and say, like this is what's going on with me. Here's who I am. Who would I like to be?
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the most powerful things that like I came across as a young man, because like, again, a lot of times we're all guilty of this, right? Like, we get locked into a box of who we think we are, right? Our ego's like, well, this is who I am and whatever. And then people that get to know you are just as bad, because then they're like, well, you are this person and we like you to be this person. This is the box we've given you. And so you feel like locked in there, but you can decide whoever the hell you want to be. And you can look at it and say, well, I do these things, I can change all of this if I want to. Some of it you can't, you're going to have predispositions toward things, but as far as the way that you move about this whole space, I mean, it can be changed. And I think it's when you talk about like Socrates, like that quote and that idea of having, like, you need to examine your life. It's super important. And I don't think that people do that enough, because it's so easy to just swipe and scroll and be stimulated and whatever else, and not to deal with your problems. Or, like you said, just kind of, you can be narcissistic and be like, it's other people's problem. It's not my problem. You
can find things that you don't like about yourself, and you have to deal with those things, and you have to kind of take responsibility over those things. It's not just like, oh, it's all my environment. Well, can you change your environment? What can you change about your life and who you are and how you maybe interact with the world? And I think like that's the hard part about it, is like you have to take ownership over kind of who you are and maybe where you found yourself, and take some responsibility over. You can't just blame it on, oh, I grew up here, or I'm in this around these people. So
this is the part that people don't like to actually live out. They love to hear it. They love to get little motivational quotes, but this is the hard work. And this is coming back to another Socratesian quote that has been repurposed by Jocko lately. And Socrates was the original one to say that through discipline, you'll find freedom. So discipline equals freedom. That's a nice quote. It looks good on a t-shirt. A lot of people don't want to do it because the easier path is to not have discipline. And what you get for that is the absence of freedom. You end up being pushed around and driven by the current and thrown by the wind because you have no sovereignty. And the last 3 chapters of my book, which is the last portion of the purpose portion, is exactly on that. I spent 3 chapters on sovereignty, because if you do the work to find out who you are, that's all well and good, but you still have to do the hard work to take hold of who you are. And by doing that, you gain access to this incredible superpower called sovereignty, which means that you are the person who controls your life. And a lot of people think, well, of course, I'm the person who controls your life. Well, not really. Most people, they are controlled by everything but themselves. They think that they're making decisions, but really these are just derivatives based off the pressures around them and as it opposes their personality. When you actually have sovereignty, I discovered through the writing of this that everybody, especially over the pandemic, they thought they lived in free countries because they were told that they were. They grew up in a country they said is free and you have freedom. I can speak to this very acutely through a Canadian's viewpoint. We thought that we had freedom up there. Turns out that we have something up there that's like the freedoms you have down here, but up there it's called the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So it's kind of like our Constitution. That thing was written in 1984. It's that young. And it had never had any pressure put on it ever until the pandemic. And as it turns out, when the pressure got put on it, there is a clause in there called the notwithstanding clause that it basically acts as a toggle switch for the government. They can flip your Charter of Rights and Freedoms on or off if they feel like they need to. And once that happened, people realized they don't have freedom because they never had it. They gave it to the government. And when the government decided to take it away, they said, we got laws, it's gone. You don't have these freedoms anymore. These ones are supposed to be protected by your charter rights. Sorry, we turned it off and we're allowed to do that. And so what I figured out through both lived experience and also researching on all these different topics is that there really is a precursor to freedom, and that precursor is sovereignty. If you aren't able to have the autonomy to say, no, you don't get to take that freedom from me, it simply will be taken. And that has to do with your sovereignty. And so learning how to figure out who you are, but then also the proclivity or the ability to defend who you are against people who want to take that from you is really, like, that is one of the greatest things about Americans, I find, is they've had generations worth of people that are, you know, roughneck when it comes to this, the do not tread on me kind of thing, come and take it kind of Texan mentality. It's born into through a whole lot of civil struggle that's happened for hundreds of years in this country. And it's fascinating to watch because we don't have that in a lot of other free countries, interestingly. But without that, you get trapped into, I think, the end of the typical 4-season cycle of strong men. You know, the hard times build strong men, strong men build good times build weak men, and weak men bring hard times. And I think we're broadly in a weak person part of that cycle where a lot of society does not have the sovereignty over themselves to take hold of who they know they are and not give it up willingly at the first bat of an eye when somebody wants to take it from them. And because of that, we, I think, did a whole lot of stupid things over the last few years that ended up, you know, leading to all sorts of societal detriments that probably, looking back again, retroactively looking back, it's a lot more obvious to see. But the problem was that we're in a cycle where all of, if not most of, our sovereignty at a societal level has been sort of proxied out to governmental powers.
So I hear you on this about the idea of basically you having to do the hard work. It's something I've like sent out in emails and stuff that, you know, information is not integration. You know, information we can get it. We can read a quote, we can read a book, we can hear a podcast, and it tickles us, right? Because information tickles us, but, you know, until you actually do something with it, right? That's like where if you read some sort of book that's supposed to give you some sort of important lessons or whatever, and you're listening to it on 3x speed, and you don't sit down and actually think about what the hell does this idea mean to me? How would I integrate this into my life to actually make it mean something rather than, ooh, that was really inspiring. Good, I'm moving on to the next chapter or whatever.
Yeah.
But to go to your quote, because I find that quote interesting. They're not the quote, but the idea, this, you know, strong men make good times make weak men, and all that cycle. And it sounds good. And I always chew on the idea. I'm like, so what does it mean to be a strong man? Because I think it's one of those things where we say, okay, strong men make weak, whatever. Well, different times are going to call for different types of strength. I mean, you look at different leaders in different times, right? Like a Churchill was needed at a certain time, and then at certain times he wasn't needed because he wasn't the right man for the job. Different people are needed, different types of strengths are needed. And so I'm not saying that the idea is not correct. I'm just saying I hear it and I'm like, well, what does it mean? And it's an idea I throw around. So I'm curious to see what you would think. What does it mean? Like when we say, like, what does it mean to be a strong man? Like, what does that mean to be strong?
Yeah.
Because again, we don't need, like in today's society, I don't need a Genghis Khan, right? Like, but we need strong men, but what does that mean for us today?
Yeah, that's it. These are all great questions. And
sure, we're just talking, right? We're just bouncing around ideas.
No, this is what people should be thinking about more often, because they have to lead themselves to the question, which generally has an uncomfortable answer, and it needs to be addressed. Otherwise, again, you can just be pulled by the wind by avoiding all of this stuff. First of all, for anyone out there screaming sexism when we use the word man, it's a short form for human. So women too. All right, we need strong women as well. People in society need to take the ownership over themselves. And that's what I think is meant by strong people, strong men in that cycle. It comes back to sovereignty, autonomy, knowing that the buck both starts and stops with you. If you're going to do something for someone else, it's because you want to do it, not because you were told to and you don't want to do it. Okay, this is where it comes back to having that strength of character. And I really think that that's what's being spoken to throughout history, through all of the Stoics all the way up till now is, and look, it doesn't have to be a leadership position to be a strong person either. You don't have to be a Churchill. You could be one of the grunts that are in the trenches up front, and you had the autonomy to go out there and choose to put your own life on the line. You didn't have to do that. Maybe even you got conscripted into it, but you could be a coward on the front lines, even if you were conscripted, or you could be conscripted and choose that you're going to go out there and win this war. And that comes back to taking a hold of the power of yourself. And it all comes back to the mind, you know. The Stoics and the Buddhists talk about this a lot, is that really the only and the most important vector of control you have in existence is over your mind. Either you have it or something else has it, but the only thing that you can do to affect reality is through the power of the control of your mind.
Sure, how you perceive things, how you choose to take on those tasks. I mean, that's something you see the Stoics talk about all the time. Like you're, again, how you take on that challenge, how you take on the suffering that comes your way, and how you choose to perceive it.
Yes, yeah.
I do think like strength, you know, obviously it's different for every season.
Well, no, before we go a little bit further, the reason I'll let you go right there. The
All
reason why I bring that up is because I see like turd burgers like online, because my views on masculinity are not about being like alpha. You know what I mean? Like that's not exactly what I see as like masculine, right? And so I see that like, you know, like alpha, strong men, all this stuff. I'm like, well, that's not actually how I see it. Like I see my mother was a strong person who was working like multiple jobs, fitting for her kids, because a weak man who left the family. Right. And so she had to be a strong mother to take it as a strong person. It's always just curious, because I always like to hear people like talk about that idea, because I'm like, we don't need a bunch of friggin' giant jacked up bodybuilder people to have a strong society, right? We need different things. And I think sometimes that that idea of like strength,
like strength is like being able to lift or move or be strong or overpower someone.
So sorry, I went off on a tangent.
And I agree. And I think like I was just kind of taking some notes, and like my thoughts of strength is like the ability to maybe, like you said, make your own decisions and sometimes do difficult things or things that are unpopular. You know, maybe not agreeing with the trend of what's going on, what's popular, what's
that's plenty right now.
Yeah. And that's hard enough to do. Yeah. Like Chewy said, and that's for me, going against the grain, going against what's favorable. I mean, I think there's some strength to be said, like, hey, I don't like the way things are going in Canada. I'm going to it takes a lot of strength. It takes a lot of will to kind of get your life or put your life in a position where you can go, all right, I'm going to travel. I'm going to, you know, sell some things I really love and care about, or, you know, let go of certain things. That takes a lot of strength too. And I'm curious, kind of going on that aspect, like, what was your process of like saying, I want to, you know, not necessarily you want to close your academy, but you needed to move on and maybe change your lifestyle or change your life in a way that you could kind of live in a way that you found was appealing or was valuable to you?
Yeah. It was a painful part of my life, to be honest. It was a lot of struggle that led up to that particular conclusion or that decision. The decision didn't have to be made. I could have gone out on my shield on that one and just, you know, gone bankrupt and had my family out on the street, more or less. But we were getting to that point. And not to go into too much detail, but it was essentially 17 months straight of 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And, you know, we weren't considered an essential business through most of it, because, you know, how are you supposed to do jiu-jitsu when you're socially distanced? There was no good way to do it during this pandemic. And
bro, did you ever see the people wearing like the masks trying to train?
Oh my God,
jiu-jitsu?
I know.
It's like, what are you guys doing?
What about the squares? They keep you in your squares too.
My buddy had a guy that was trying to, because he was allowed to train if they wore masks, so they were sweating in their masks and then rolling,
dripping.
Anyway,
his mouth.
But so 2 weeks to flatten curve, absolute nonsense. Sorry,
But whatever it was during that 17 months of nonsense, just nonsense after nonsense. By that point, it was about May of 2021.
Okay.
where I should have gone under back in December. Before that, I was out of like every form of capital, all of my savings, all of my credit, everything was just gone, 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 gone. And I had to figure out from December till May to try to just make the next month's bills. And it's something to try to make the bills when you aren't allowed to be open. So it's this paradox of like, you make sure you pay your bills, but also don't make money. Well, I don't have any money. Well, still pay the bills.
Yeah.
And they just leave you with that. So I put my nose to the grindstone. I'd already been nose to the grindstone for like the better part of a year anyways, trying to keep this thing afloat against all odds. And I found ways of trying to move all of my business online and start doing e-commerce while I couldn't do like brick and mortar commerce, and wound up through hook or by crook trying different ways every single month for 5 months straight to figure out how to make out of thin air somewhere between $8,000 to $10,000 just materialize for me. New way every month. And it's never going to work the same way the next month because nobody wants to buy the same shirt or get the same instructional. There's a whole struggle that happened up to that point. Now, two things happened through that process. By May, I had a hard talk with my wife. She sat me down one day and said, I see what you're doing. I appreciate everything that you've done so far, but you have to stop because we're going to be driven into the ground at this point, and it's getting worse and worse every single month. And we have a chance now to sell our house and walk away with something instead of having our house foreclosed on and walk away with nothing. And, for me, as I'm a single income provider for a family of 6, I cannot lose the house. That's just, you cannot have that done. That's utter and absolute failure. And she told me, it's okay. We can sell the house. We'll have another house in the future. It's not everything. What matters is us, and we're going to take care of us first. So we ended up doing that. It was a very difficult choice, but we ended up selling the house, getting just enough money to buy an RV and a truck, which we've never owned either of, and put our whole family into, and just figure it out on the fly of now we have no home. Technically, our home is on wheels, and we're going to be living whatever it is to be a gypsy life in the year 2021. At that point, we've been doing it for about 2 years. But the other thing that happened during that 5 months of trying to make money appear out of nowhere is I gained a skill that I didn't have before. Of this interesting thing happens where necessity is the mother of all invention. And I needed something to happen. And I just made it happen through just sheer force of will. And in that process, I learned the capability, the skill set of relying on myself against all odds. And really, it sounds cliche to say so, but it's the only thing that's kept us going this entire time. And it continues to keep us going. And it's something that I religiously fall back upon is I need to make things happen. First of all, because nobody else is going to make it happen for me. That comes back to sovereignty. And second of all, I know I can do it. So I just continue to do it. And we're in this interesting lifestyle now where a lot of people try to make plans for their life. We've been living with the absence of plans for the better part of 2 years right now. And it's part of being mobile is you put no anchors down anywhere. And it's this interesting exercise in not holding anything too tightly and allowing things to change and allowing to move with the change and figure out what your life is going to be from day to day, week to week, month to month.
So with that gypsy lifestyle you're living, what have been some of the like positives from it, maybe that you didn't expect? Like some of you are like, wow, like I was surprised about this, right? And then what are some things that have maybe not negatives, but things that have been more challenging than maybe you expected?
Well, I think the positives are the obvious silver linings, because whenever I tell people I live full-time mobile, they're like, man, I've always wanted to do that. They have it in their mind, all of the benefits. So they kind of know, like you sightsee, you get to do the road trip thing often, you meet new people, you hit new gyms, all of the cool things about taking a vacation from whatever normal life is for you, right? So all those things are true. They're real. The cons side of the coin people tend to forget about or not think about is that, again, you have no anchors anywhere. So part of it sounds like a first world problem, but it's still a problem, is that you basically have to plan a vacation every week, more or less, when you're moving like that, which is everything to do with, logistics, figure out where you're going to go, how much money, breaking down on the road, getting places that have shitty connection or shitty people, or, there's all the problems that come with just traveling in general. But on top of that, too, living in basically a minimalist lifestyle in an RV with 6 people living in there, you have very little of anything and very little storage for anything. So you figure out how little you can live off of. And, I never want to sound like am complaining about any of this, because I know there are all sorts of other people throughout the world
we're
that
just
have
talking
it
about
much
it. Yeah.
worse. But what's interesting is when you find those other people that have it much worse, they come to the same realization that you can choose to feel and be content no matter what your situation is. And I think that that is the superpower that the Stoics and the Buddhists come back to all the time, is taking control of your mind and choosing to be happy. You remember that movie back in the day Will Smith did called The Pursuit of Happiness?
I never saw that one.
Okay, he was playing the role of a door-to-door salesman. He was a single father that had to try to take care of his son while he was on the road, and
Was that the dad that became like a stockbroker or something, or he's selling some machine and made a bunch of money?
Yeah, he was selling machine
His
from
kid was
company to
sick,
company.
maybe.
Yeah, it was very heart-wrenching, right? This role that he played. And there was a line in that movie where he talked about the Declaration of Independence, and the line saying the pursuit of happiness, right? And he said, how did they know to put the pursuit part in there? Like, as if you could never actually get it. Like, it's always going to be something that you're pursuing. And it's an interesting philosophical to consider, because I think that there's a fallacy in the belief that that pursuing happiness is the goal. Again, this is trying to find the final note of a symphony. I think actually when you can figure out and find out and allow to exist in your life the ability to be content no matter what the situation, to speak back to Alan Watts wishing that hospitals could teach people to enjoy their suffering. You don't get to choose your environment. You don't get to choose what people do to you, what world events happen around you, but you do get to take control of your mind if you want to, and choose how you're going to react to this. This is, again, Stoicism 101. You don't scream at the waves for them crashing into the beach. You know, you cannot change what cannot be changed, but you are the only one in control of your reaction to that. And I think that this lifestyle has really led me into the understanding and the acceptance of just being content and trying to enjoy a fulfillment no matter what happens, good or bad.
Yeah, I remember I had an interesting experience, not nearly as crazy as yours or as life-changing as yours as far as with your family. But I remember when I went into the gym business stuff full time, right? At the time before I did it, there was a period of about a year that this sort of thing happened. And I had a house, I had a car, I had all these things. I was like 22, 23, and like, it's all the things that when you grow up, society has conditioned you that these are the trappings of success.
That's right.
Right. And so that's what I was after. Okay. So I've got a house, I've got a car. I'm doing all these things right there. And I remember I did those things because I had the woman with me. We weren't married, but we had been together for a while, and it seemed like it was going that way. And so we got the house, got the car, got all this stuff. And then the relationship fell through. And then I'm like, man, I remember going and taking a little week-long vacation of training, coming back and like, what am I doing? And then like thinking about like, what does an actual happy life look like to me? Right. Like to me, like, what does that look like? And so within a year I had no house, the car was like, we got that taken care of. And then I was able to go jump into this gym stuff full time. And I remember I had this interesting moment because I had to move back home for a little bit, right? Which was not what you want to do when you're like 22.
No,
23. You don't want to move back home. And the best part was my mom's house, like at this point, my old bedroom had become kind of this little storage area. And so like when I moved back home, I had two hampers. One was clean, one was dirty. And I had an air mattress that would deflate halfway through the night. And so, I'm there sleeping, and in the middle of the night, I would be sunken in and I'd have to press the button. It would reflate and I'd go back to sleep. And I remember like waking up though, and I would have this, I remember there was a moment in my mind that I remember that reminds me of kind of what you were talking about, where I was in this air mattress, I have no money, like I'm broke, but I get to go up and train at the gym this morning. And I don't know where I'm going to get enough money because I was making just enough to get by. I don't know where I'm going to make for like snacks and for food and everything else, but I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And of course, everything worked, but I was happy. I was happy with that. And it's something that stuck with me, where like kind of getting to know yourself.
Yes.
Well, I'm happy with very few things. And so if I'm going to take on new things, I'm going to be very intentional about it. Like, this is why, like, I think cars are really cool, for instance, but I don't want one. I don't want an expensive car. Like the thought of having a car payment or spending a crap ton of my money on a car makes me sick. I'm like, I don't want one. It's not a big deal to me. You know, and so it's one of those things where like I know people love that and people love having cars. It's just look at how cool my car. I don't give a shit. It's not my thing. You know, and I know what's important to me. And I think that that's an important thing. Like going back to what you've said this about sovereignty, about knowing yourself, and all this stuff is like going back to like really figuring out who you are, what you want, and then making a concerted effort to actually design your lifestyle to be what it is that you want, rather than simply saying, I'd love those things, but you know what, I can't do that. And actually like working your tail off to like make that thing a reality.
Yeah, 100%. I've had very much the same experience throughout my life. And unfortunately, I waited way too long. I wish everybody wishes they started earlier. Just like jiu-jitsu. Everybody wishes they started earlier, even if they started when they're 6, you know?
Yeah, right.
Everybody
when I
always
was 3.
Yeah, everybody regrets for want of the past. But it all comes back to, I think you're basically expounding upon the same idea of the mind of the ant. Is what is the thing you would most want to do every single day when you get up that nobody has to demand from you? It's not something that somebody has a whip behind you forcing you to go out and find whatever it is that you want to do. You want to go do that. And an interesting thing opens up when you actually allow and honor that as an avenue, and you take that onus upon yourself of not only am I going to take care of myself, but I'm going to do what I want to do by doing that. And you will work harder than you've ever worked in any job that you've ever had before, because A, nobody's going to do it for you, but B, it's the thing you most want to do anyways. Like people wish that, you know, when they're growing up, when they're a teenager, they could just play video games all day because they enjoy it so much.
Sure.
Imagine the joy of that, but as a career. And it doesn't have to be video games. Some people make it that, but for me, it was jujitsu. For you, it was jujitsu. For other people, it could be, you know, woodworking or building like little shoes or whatever. You know, there's something, and I think there's many things for every single person that can drive them and be that actuary of what is the thing I most want to do. And if you allow yourself the latitude to believe that you can and should be doing that, man, all sorts of different avenues open up that nobody is going to show you or tell you how to do it. And you don't need them to.
Yeah. And to go back to something you kind of, we touched on, I think in different ways, like with jujitsu, I think it's important, or one of the best lessons I think that we can get. So for kind of going back to what you said, you learned this ability to be like completely self-reliant and to be comfortable with like, embracing whatever's going to come to you and knowing that you have what it takes to deal with it when it comes, right? And I like when I think about like things like with jiu-jitsu, I think that was like one of the more important lessons that I got from it that maybe helped me when I got older, because one of the hardest lessons for me to learn in jiu-jitsu was to be okay with failure and to not look at it as such a negative thing. You know, again, we don't have to like failure, but a lot of times failure is on the other side of the coin of success. And a lot of times our successes, if we look at them, are kind of built on like a mound of the failures. I think of it as almost like failures are like your currency. That's what you pay for. What, like, if you want something good, you're going to have to fail, and that's your currency to pay for it. And I feel like there's so many people that want to try something. They want to go do something new. They want to maybe start a business. They want to try some new activity. They want to try to learn some new skill or whatever it might be. And they don't, because they're afraid of the failure part of it. They're afraid of it. Not even the actual afraid of the actual reality of the situation, but they're just afraid of the failure. And I think that if you can go through some experience, you know, whatever it might be, whether it be through training or something off the mats, right, where you can really have life come at you and you come out on top and you realize that, you know, you'll be all right. Like that's a transcendent thing, because then it becomes this thing like, what else do I want to do? You know, like what else do I want to try to tackle? Because sure, I know I'm going to fail. It's a foregone conclusion that I'm going to have some failures. So I'm not afraid of them. And I have the courage to deal with them because I know what it takes to deal with them. I've done it before. So let's go try new stuff. And I think if someone can sort of embody that sort of mindset, that allows them then to experiment, like you said, and then they can find that purpose. They can find the thing that really drives them, rather than being stuck here because, well, being here is comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. There's an analogy that I draw in the book that I found. I had a similar life experience to when I lost the gym 5 years before that, where I ended up losing my career. That I'd been a journeyman welder for 15 years and found myself work my way up in that career to a point that was really comfortable. I had the best job in town. It was union. It paid great. I could go home every night. You know, it was awesome. And I hated it. I absolutely hated going to work, you know, but I felt like there was no lateral move out. I'd climbed the ladder so high, I can't simply just step off the edge of it, you know? And it ended up being that the company got sold out from underneath me, where I didn't have a choice anymore. all of a sudden I didn't have it. And I've never been more grateful for that eventuality. As serendipitous as it might have been, it was the thing that fledged me out of the nest, and I needed to be. And the feeling of being trapped in that scenario, maybe it's your career, maybe it's your life, whatever it is, you feel like that you can't actually stop what you're doing. It's too far, it's too late. You've built everything upon this. It's too much. What really it is, the feeling when you're there is like there's a glass ceiling above you and you can't go through it, and you accept that you simply can't go through it. But having a glass ceiling over your head allows for a floor underneath your feet. So you're stuck in that in between. Like without the ceiling, I wouldn't have the floor. So I'm not going to break the ceiling or else the floor falls. And what it really is a gilded cage. And people think if they break that glass ceiling and try to expand past what other people are telling them they're limited to, yes, the floor will fall out underneath you, but you have this remarkable opportunity to find out if you can fly. And now it's up to you. You can fall to the ground as the floor falls out underneath you, or you can try to fly and go higher than that glass ceiling was above you. And again, the necessity is the mother of all invention. I feel like under duress, humans have supernatural abilities to take care of themselves when they have to.
Sure. Well, I mean, anybody can think about that. Like you can think back to your life. For those of you listening, there was probably some period of time where the rubber met the road and you had to do something. There was no question of if or if you wanted to or when you got around to it, you had to do that stuff, and magically you got it done, right? Like magically, oh, that was it. I somehow I made it through. And so if you could put yourself into those situations, and it lights a fire under you that you simply can't do if it's something that you kind of want to do, but when you're forced to, you'll do it.
That's right.
Gotta kind of go all in some capacities. So let me ask you this. So you've been a welder, you were a gym owner. What are you doing now to like make ends meet? What skills have you gained throughout this time, and how are you kind of making ends meet, getting yourself enough time enough money to kind of do the things to travel? Because it still costs money. You gotta fuel up the RV to get somewhere. You gotta have somewhere to stay, kind of, for campsites, things like that, food. So what are you doing now to kind of make ends meet? And how did you come upon this? Like, how did you discover what to do and how to make it work?
Yeah. Well, what's cool is no matter how I did it, and I will explain the nitty gritty in a sec, but it is the ability to do it that I would like to, try to emphasize for people that are trying to, if they think I'm going to give them a formula for how they can do it, then they're missing the point. So I can tell them the formula that worked for me. It's probably not going to work for most people, and that's fine. They've probably got a different one that will work for them, but the overarching heuristic of it is taking control of yourself and doing it for yourself. And again, that I can't overemphasize how important that is. So for me, what allows me to live on the road was basically what I learned during those 5 months of attrition, where I had to basically magic hat $8,000 to $10,000 out of my ass online somehow each month ad infinitum for the rest of my life. As far as I was concerned, it was indefinite, and I built and discovered a skill set in that. A lot to do with mindset. That is like, if I need to make money, I will simply make money. And that is it. That's full stop. That's the sentence. And then plug that into whatever scenario you're in. I podcast full time. I have sponsors through that. I've got instructionals through Fanatics. I've got instructionals through Jiu-Jitsu X. I have my own instructionals online. I have a membership site. I sell rash guards, shorts, t-shirts. I've got sponsors for my meme page. I've got all of these different avenues that any given one of them could probably end up taking care of me, but I've got like a dozen of them so that I can fill that basket with any sort of thing, and no one thing will pull the rug out from underneath me, which was a super necessary safety net considering how insecure life has been over the last while. I want to sort of stack the deck as often as much as I can to try to make sure that if I miss $1,000 this month, I'm not going to, hit rock bottom. So it really doesn't matter what it is I'm making money through. Like now I've got a book. I didn't have that a month ago. That's going to be something that'll be a recurring income for the rest of my life. And you just keep stacking these things on top of each other. But what the thing is it's driven by the understanding and the belief in myself and being able to continually do the work and just take care of yourself. The same way, like everything is an easy analogy back to jiu-jitsu. The same way that you go to the gym and you're guaranteed to get better the more you go. the more you believe in yourself and rely on yourself to do things, you're going to pile up those wins. There'll be losses too, to speak back to Chewy's point. Man, I've got hundreds of things that didn't work out compared to like the dozen of things that do work out, but that's all part of the process. It's the same thing with life in every single way. You're going to get armbarred a whole lot before you start armbarring people. It's all just the process of doing the work, believing in the process, and really just holding primacy over you as the actuary. You're the person of control in the whole situation.
What's your favorite thing to, that you've learned or discovered? What's your favorite thing to work on? Is there one thing? Obviously, the book is kind of newer and it's more of been taking a lot of your attention. Is there one thing that you've really enjoyed growing or building?
Well, it's almost embarrassing at this point because so much of my life and my income for the last 16 years has been jiu-jitsu. But most of what I focus on these days isn't jiu-jitsu. And it's not because I don't love jiu-jitsu or don't do jiu-jitsu anymore. It's just I've become enamored by things like philosophy, by things like technology, by things like conversations at a societal level, geopolitics, all of these things that maybe a lot of people got interested in earlier in life that I'm kind of coming back around to after I guess stretched myself outside of the fish pond of jiu-jitsu. And that's largely what my podcast is. It's called The Social Disorder, and we talk about all of the disorders of society and society in general, and what it is to be human and exist within a group of humans, and all of the things that happen, whether it's pop culture or ancient history. It's fascinating to me, to a degree that it is that mind of the ant thing for me, where I want to do it. I wake up and I want to do it. So I know that I should do it. So I do honor that desire to do it. And it's birthed into this book, into this podcast, and into, a new passion.
Yeah, and a lot of people probably know you from your meme page, right? And that's been like, it's probably one of the first jiu-jitsu meme pages I think I saw. Is there like, what was the reason to start that? And just kind of like, how do you creatively get these ideas and kind of find these kind of memes that really take off?
Yeah. Well, isn't it funny that if you really wanted to reduce down where most of my whatever people would call success seems to have come from, was from some random decision I made in the middle of a welding shift when I was a purple belt because I was pissed off at jiu-jitsu. We were going through a lot of political bullshit in our gym. We were trying to go in and out of some affiliations that were screwing us over, and I felt like I was never getting anywhere. I was like 4.5 years into my purple belt with no avenue to get my next belt, and it felt like it was never going to happen. And at that point, it was the only point I've ever done jiu-jitsu where I thought about quitting, legitimately, just like, this is not worth it. It's so frustrating every single day knowing I'm not going to get to where I'm trying to get to. And I'm not saying that that was a right feeling, but it was just where I was at. I was at this position where I was pissed off with jiu-jitsu. And so I had this idea in the middle of a shift one day on the floor at the welding shop. I pulled out my phone and downloaded a meme app. And my goal was to make a whole bunch of jokes about jiu-jitsu. And as insults, I wanted to insult jiu-jitsu because I was pissed off at it. I want to show all of the stupidity about how stupid jiu-jitsu is for this, that, and the other. And so I did. And I poured out all sorts of memes within the first week. And this interesting thing happened. I expected to get in a whole bunch of comment wars, and this was going to be my vengeance upon people to show how stupid jiu-jitsu was. Is everybody started laughing with me. They weren't laughing at me or getting mad. There was this odd, unexpected commiseration of like, yeah, we are kind of dumb because of that, or this is kind of silly because of this. And I felt, instead of this loneliness and this feeling of inevitable nothing, of like, I just need to quit this because it's going nowhere, I felt this camaraderie that I didn't know was there. It's like, this is actually cool and beautiful, and there's a group, there's a community that not only understands this but feels it too, and we can all joke about it together, and it's not wrong. It's actually, it feels kind of right. And it blew up in short order, where people were allowed to laugh at the stupidity from different angles. Because I mean, look, we're grown-ass men who buy $200 pajamas to go wrestle each other and then go to our jobs in the morning. Like, there's all sorts of things that you can make fun of about it. And this, nobody could have predicted. I couldn't have predicted, I'm going to start this thing and I'm going to make a legitimate career and income and life out of this that can support a family. You can't make a 5-year plan about starting a meme page. So this again speaks back to, I had a passion at that point that I honored and I followed, and who the hell knew where it was going to end up? I certainly didn't. And at this point, it's what I'm most well known for. It makes no sense to me, like, conceptually, but that it simply is what it is. And I couldn't have written a biography that was more ridiculous than that, but that's just what it is.
Mm-hmm.
With your stuff, I'm curious because now obviously you're branching out from just being a jiu-jitsu guy. Have you had any weird like negative comments, backlash, or people like, dude, I don't want to hear about this or whatever? Have you had any of that?
Oh, all the time. You can't have an opinion without having people hating your opinion, especially the bigger you are on a platform online. Like comment sections are meant for contrarians, so that they're going to fill up with it every single time. Doesn't matter if it's a podcast or a post or whatever. They're going to hate on whatever you're doing, but that doesn't matter. Like I love remembering whenever stuff like that happens that okay, you can think whatever you want. It doesn't have to affect me. I don't have to scream at the waves just because I hate what they're doing right now. I can control my reaction to it. And that it's like reps in the gym itself. Is the more people hate on you, the more you learn how to exist with that hate without internalizing it. Because again, being sovereign, you only allow what's allowed into your mind. You're the one that has to allow it. And even if it hurts, understand like what's going on. Take a second and meditate on what that experience is. Um, Understand that there's a hormonal response is probably going to happen and live your life after that. Or if you have a hard time doing that, simply ignore it. Like the Rogan thing, post and ghost. Like you don't have to interact with that type of negativity. But to believe that you could exist doing anything important that has anything to do with opinions or ideas without that type of negativity is a lost cause.
Well, sure. And I mean, negative comments are always going to come. And obviously the negative comments online typically come from emotionally unstable people, or at least emotionally reactive people who don't know how to use their big boy voice or their big girl voice. Right. It's like, you wouldn't speak to someone like this in person. You wouldn't tell your children to speak to someone like this. Why would you do that? Anyway, but I was more specifically curious about, because there's this thing where, let's say if I come to know you in a certain way, we mentioned this earlier, then I expect you, because again, pattern recognition, I see you, okay, you're this guy and this is where you belong in my categorical, sort of like space. And then all of a sudden you say, well, I want to do this. Hey, stop being different. Go back to being the same person you've always been, right? And I always find that interesting where you see people do that, where they want to start changing as we're all changing all the time. And then people have come to know a person in a particular way, and that's their sort of like their model or their icon of that person. Say, this is who you're always supposed to be and don't change. And then when that person decides to change, like, hey, well, you're not being yourself anymore. What does that even mean? Like, of course I'm being myself, and myself is going to change from time to time. So I was just curious. And so obviously I know there's negative comments, but I wasn't sure if anybody had came to you and said, dude, what are you doing? You're not, I come to you for memes, not this social disorder stuff. I'm not coming to your book or whatever,
I know I'm the worst when it comes to branding myself, because I don't stay on brand on anything. I'm sure if there was somebody like some managerial that wanted to take over and try to
some bean counter.
Yeah, exactly. Bean counter that wants to, we're going to brand you, and this is the brand, and you stay within these parameters. And look, that's a pattern for success. I'm sure a lot of people have made a lot of money doing that, and this, that, and the other. But to me, what's more important is who I am authentically. If I try to cover that for the sake of success, or follow off that path because I think that it's more worth it, either monetarily or in the short term, I just know that that's not me. I can't stand that. Maybe it's just part of my own predisposition. It bothers me in a way to try to act. I'm not a good actor. I'll put it that way. Who you see is who I am, and that's just what it is. To speak back to your point, there's something huge there when you said that people have a model for who they think you are, and they get pissed off when you don't represent that model they thought you are. I just did a podcast the other day. I think it just came out actually today, called 8 Billion Worlds. And that speaks to the idea that although we all live on one Earth, we are all 8 billion different people on Earth, we all individually have our own perception of what total reality is within that one Earth. And no one is like another one. So we really do live on 8 billion different worlds on one Earth. And so when my perception of what your part in my world is supposed to be doesn't match, it's going to make you annoyed that this person doesn't match what you thought prototypically they were. Therefore, they're wrong. They're the drama, right? And this becomes this self-perpetuating cycle of anger and outrage in this way that I don't think a lot of people recognize, that if you allow the latitude for people to at least have the understanding that they don't see the world that you do, and nor should they, then I think people will stop getting so pissed off with this person is ignorant or hypocritical or is different for this, that, or the other. man, who are you to say what they are at all? Just enjoy being who you are. And if it doesn't match who you are, the way that they're acting, that's fine too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, change is uncomfortable for a lot of people. For everyone, we get comfortable with what I hate change. I hate it so much that I tattooed my tattoo. It says change is the only constant. That was the
Yeah.
first tattoo I ever got because I hated change. I was so uncomfortable with it. And I just for some reason decided to get it tattooed on me for some reason. But like that's one of the things, like you can't just do the same shit over and over. You have to evolve, you have to grow.
You don't
Like
have to, you just don't have a choice.
Well, actually,
If you're
I
going to
think it's kind of
change,
both.
like
It's both at the same time, because you can't be the same person that you were yesterday, but you can believe that you are. So at a certain point, you'll stop being the avatar that you think that you are, because you're changing, and there's going to be this tension between who you actually are and who you think you are. To speak back to Alan Watts, one of my favorite quotes of his is, "You have no obligation to be the same person you were 5 minutes ago." And there's a great philosopher from the 1950s, a French philosopher by the name of Gilles Deleuze, and he had this whole counterintuitive idea that people either loved or hated, that he said that reality is actually an act of creation. And to a very startling degree, psychologically, that is the truth, is every single person creates their own reality. And it changes with every single environmental impact and interaction you have. Every single life experience adds to a total cluster, a galaxy of nodes of total experience that play off each other like a harmony, like a symphony. And you don't know that it's happening, but you absolutely have to change. It's that idea of stepping into a river twice. You're stepping into the same river, but it's not the same river, because it's changed in the time you've stepped in and out of it. It's different water passing you, and it's not, no fault of the river. How could you expect that it was going to be the same thing? But it's what it is to be human, is change, and just reality is always changing. And I know it's very uncomfortable, because you have to try to live with the change and figure out how best to deal with it. But to believe that there is no change, or worse, that there should not be any change, and you have that projected on other people, is how could you leave the faith, or how could you believe this, or quit your career, or get divorced, or whatever it was that's a major change that happens in people's lives. Like, man, how can you expect somebody to be the same person they were 10 years ago? That to me is insanity.
Yeah, it's inevitable. I mean, in my opinion, because like you said, the landscape, the world is not the same as it was 5, 10 years ago, even 3 years ago, right? When you were, in the thick of all this, we were in the thick of all this craziness. I do want to ask you something a little bit about jiu-jitsu specifically. Like with you traveling so much, how have you kind of kept jujitsu, something that you consistently do, that you train, and maybe some advice for people that travel a lot for work or their livelihood? Have you kind of been able to continue to grow your jujitsu, or at least have jujitsu have some kind of impact in your life?
Yeah. So, speaking to like taking control of your life, it's very difficult to consistently train when you're consistently on the move, but
Sure.
you have the ability to, if you consider it something that's non-negotiable. And that's what I do. I consider it non-negotiable. I'm going to make sure that there's gyms around wherever I'm going, and try to train as much as I can. And sometimes it's more some weeks, or less some weeks, but I have to make sure that I'm training. John Donaher had an interesting insight in this, that he at least put into the mind space before I recognized that it was the truth, is that when you're training and learning jujitsu, it's a lot harder to do when you're traveling around. It's much easier to make growth and expansion if you are at the same place, training with the same people, and building on a consistency. It's more obvious, the difference in growth. There's more ways to improve without having to adjust to new scenarios. And so what I've found to sort of exist within that reality, which it seems to be the case, is it's much harder to make big growth steps in your jujitsu if you're constantly moving. It's more of just a maintenance thing. And unless you're like a full-time competitor, I speak back to Chewy's thing, is being enjoying the hobbyist thing. I'm really enjoying the hobbyist thing right now, where I'm not holding an onus on me to become so much better in this next year than I was last year, but I'm not going to stop doing it. I'm going to upkeep. It is going to improve intermittently in intervals, but again, I'm more enjoying the experience at this point than I am trying to meet any particular criteria or standard of growth.
Is there a favorite place that you trained since you've been on the road? Like a gym, maybe some gyms maybe you expect to be really awesome gyms to train at, some maybe little hidden gems, or anywhere that you've been or you trained that you really enjoyed?
Yeah, definitely. There's a cliche in jiu-jitsu. I'm sure you've all heard it that your vibe attracts your tribe, and every single gym has a different vibe, and some of them you're just not going to vibe with. And I found that you'll figure it out as you go. But
Mhm.
man, there have been some really cool open gyms. At least they vibe with me. There's SBG in Montana that was really
Mhm.
cool. There's 10th Planet in Austin here is really cool. They're wide open. I'm training right now primarily at Gracie with Tim Kennedy at Cedar Park, and that's a fantastic gym. Giancarlo Bodoni is doing the gi classes. They got like 25 black belts, all sorts of people coming through at all times. So it's an adventure in itself, and I'm really enjoying that. But man, I've trained with Eddie Bravo at his headquarters. I've trained with people in Florida that you would know. It's its own adventure, it's its own experience, and I couldn't pick one out of all of them. There's just too many.
Very cool. Yeah. And kind of maybe wrapping it up, like we talked about the process, kind of doing the thing and being kind of focusing on the moment ahead of you. What's the ultimate goal? Do you have like a goal, 6 months, 1 year? What do you want to do? I mean, you may want to do this thing forever. I don't know. Like what's your kind of end goal? Where do you want to see your life go?
You must have taken a bribe from my dad because he's been asking me that for forever. Is what is the end goal? You can't just like make some
No,
plans here, Drew. No, I know I'm kind of picking on you here, but I get asked this all the time. It's like,
Yeah.
why are you doing this? What is the point? What is the end goal? And to me, it's like, what do you mean point? Like I'm not trying to find the end note. I'm enjoying the process. I'm here enjoying the symphony, and it is different every single day. And sometimes it sucks, and that's different itself, and sometimes it's great, and that's different, and sometimes all sorts of unexpected things pop up. Hey man, I'm on Chewjitsu podcast today, that's kind of cool. There's all these different things that you just got to enjoy. And I mean, it's not to say that I don't try to do different things, but I really try not to make long form plans, because I mean, what's the old quote is the easiest way to make God laugh is to tell him your plans. Like, just
Hmm.
don't hold on so tightly to what it is to be who you are. Again, projecting who you think you are in your world to you. Allow yourself to be who you are as change happens, as the world happens around you. And man, don't take things so personally if they don't go your way.
Mhm. Yeah. So, Drew, if people want to, Drew, you have anything?
No, it's
No?
good.
All right,
No.
awesome. So, if people want to get a hold of you, if they want to listen to your podcast, check out your book, see what you're up to, where's the best place for them or places for them to do that?
Yeah, online for social media. I mostly live on Instagram, so you can find me. My personal there is drew.weatherhead. For the memes, follow because_jitsu. And yeah, if you want to hear more of my thoughts, I do 5 podcasts a week on the social disorder. It's all on all platforms. And I just came out with this book a few weeks ago. It's available in hardcover and in paperback. It's available digital Kindle, and we just came out with the Audible book. So go get the audiobook on Audible, and you can listen to me read it to you.
Very
Nice.
cool.
And just the name of it for the people that are listening right now.
Yeah, is Consciousness, Reality, and Purpose.
Nice. Very cool, bro. Brother, thank you for being on. It's good to chat with you again. Like I said, I think the last time we actually talked in person was 2021, probably
Yeah.
when you were in the thick of the mess that you talked about earlier.
I remember that. It was an empty gym at that point.
Such a bummer. I'm glad things are going well for you guys now, though.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for the talk, guys.
Absolutely. Thank
Awesome,
you for
brother.
coming on.
Take care.
All right, guys. So hopefully you enjoyed that podcast. Again, as we said before in the beginning of the podcast, is a little different than normal, right? It's a little different podcast than maybe what you were expecting. But hopefully you got some useful perspective, some useful idea that maybe could help you. Again, maybe even if it's just the book thing. That's something that I see all the time where people flex on their books and they don't do anything with them. Like if you guys ever come to my house, and maybe I'll do a video on this one day, like my books, like they've got notes all through them.
Yeah.
I've got extra pages of like I'll write actual like stuff that the notes are in there. And so the notes become like the important part. So I can look through there and I can find all the different ideas I think are really important about that book. And I have a much better retention of the information that's in that book. Because again, it's like a jiu-jitsu technique. You think about it this way. Think about how many jiu-jitsu techniques you've learned and how many you actually use.
Exactly.
Very few. And you got to think about this with books too. You're going to read a ton of books, and some of them you're going to like, some of them you're not going to like. It's fine. The ones that you like, really dig into those suckers because it's like a deck of cards, right? You're basically trying to search for your hand, And then once you have that hand, then you play that hand to the best of its abilities. I mean, to me, that's what it's about. Whether that's jiu-jitsu, whether that's your skill set, like Drew Weatherhead on the podcast, right? He found his deck of cards in relation to his career so far. And he's able to play those hand and make enough money for his family. We all have those options. And so it's not about everything. It's about finding your stuff. And again, it's only going to be a selected amount. So it's not about more. It's about finding the stuff that you like best, that works best for you, and then just going into that stuff like 100%.
Yeah. You have a certain amount of bandwidth, like a certain amount of bandwidth you can retain. And you got to find what, like, some things will speak, just like techniques. You'll just cling to certain techniques, and you'll dive in and you'll kind of want to learn more about them. Something I do with audiobooks specifically, because I'm not much of a audio learner. Like it's hard for me to learn just by listening. So I actually will listen to audiobooks. Then I will take voice notes of the parts that, or the areas or the quotes or whatever. And then I'll go back and I'll take those voice notes and I'll write them in a journal and I'll rewrite everything. So just to kind of solidify. And then I have, like you said, that journal of like this book or this podcast I thought was very meaningful or important to me in some capacity. And that's how I kind of retain it. And then I can go back and refresh my memory and stuff too. Yeah.
And then if I come across a really good idea, that idea makes it into like my digital, notebooks. So this way, like if I want to search it up, I can just finger through it. And like a lot of times, if I'm looking for certain ideas, I can just finger through and scroll through this notebook that has all these really useful ideas that I found very important in this little notebook.
Yeah.
So again, to me, it goes back to information. It's not integration. And if you want to integrate something, like if you come across a cool technique, it might tickle you. You're like, man, this looks really cool. But until you drill it, until you work with it, until you really break it down, you don't really know it. And it's not that useful. Yeah.
You have to be able to almost like you said, break it down is the thing. You have to, Drew was talking about coaching, teaching. It's like, you have to literally take this thing that you kind of intuitively, your body's kind of done and knows how to do it. Yeah. You have to almost like dissect it and almost go backwards. It's like you're playing that's like Pulp Fiction, maybe the movies going backwards.
Yeah. You have to try to learn something well enough that you could think you could teach it. And if nothing else, teach it to yourself. But try to learn it well enough that you can teach it. But guys, again, to wrap this show up, again, thanks to our sponsors for helping make this thing happen. Charlotte's Web, check them out at charlottesweb.com. Promo code is Jiu-Jitsu20. Again, no pressure on this, but this is my encouragement to you is to, with any supplement, try it out, see how it works for you. Go to their website, see if you want to get like a tincture where it's like just like a dropper, or if you want the gummies, whatever you want. If you find something you like, get it, and you can get 20% off with the promo code Jiu-Jitsu20. Also, just a reminder, if you guys are someone that is, you have to watch what you take in because you have to take a piss test, check out their supplement, this Daily Sports Edge. It's one of their newer products, and it is NSF certified sport, which means that if you were being tested by USADA, that they would say that this supplement is safe to take. Again, that may or may not, be good enough for what you have to test for, but I would encourage you to look into it if it's something that you want to try. Because I know over the years I've talked to tons of people that wanted to try CBD, but because of like silly piss test things that they had to do, they couldn't do it. So again, try it out if that's something that you're interested in. Also, thanks to Matt over at Roll BJJ.com. You can check out his website. He's got tons of cool jiu-jitsu gear, everything from shorts and rash guards and gis and t-shirts. Again, I'm a big fan of the quality of the products, and I also like the designs. I had my my special edition Jiu-Jitsu gis and rash guards and shorts made from Matt, and I plan to do it again sometime in the near future. More details on that as it comes. But in the meantime, if you want to go to his website, pick up some new gear, you can do so and get 15% off using the promo code Jiu-Jitsu for 15% off. Also, guys, thanks to Manscaped. If you guys are a man, or if you have a man in your life that needs to step up their grooming game, they can do so with the premier products that Manscaped offers. So again, I've talked about this multiple times. I was so reluctant to bring them on as a sponsor initially, just because, again, it's like the products were initially focused around trimming up your ball hairs, which it just, I mean, it's like it's something we all do, but it's not something you really want to talk about. Like,
how's your ball hair trimming going?
Okay? me and Eugene don't go up to each other and say, "Hey, man, how's your ball hair trimming been going?"
It's going good. Actually.
Like, I've never gone to Eugene and said, "Hey," like I've never gone to another man and said, "Hey, man, what kind of ball hair trimmer do you use?" It's like you just don't think about it. But they sent the product. I was like, tried it. I was like, damn, man, this is actually a pretty good product.
Pretty good.
It's a pretty good product. So I was like, all right, we'll offer it. And a lot of you guys actually have taken advantage of it. And so tons of you guys have sent me receipts. So like, all right, I'm stepping up my game. Here we go.
That's cool.
But that said, too, along with it, they've got a lot of other products now. And so they've got everything from colognes and soaps and beard oils and balms and everything else. And they recently came out with like, it's like a whole beard kit, but they also got the trimmer.
Yeah.
And again, the trimmer is super nice. I really like it. Like I had my old like corded trimmer that I used to use for everything. And it's really only purpose of this time was to trim up my beard because it had guards on it.
Yeah.
And then now like I don't need it anymore. So I've got that one. And again, it's nice because technically you could use it, do whatever you want, but it's got this adjustable guard. So as you're going through, instead of having to swap off the guards or anything else, you just flip it has this little dial. You just move the dial up or down, boom, you've got it either longer or shorter, and you can trim your beard up. Again, I typically go shorter on the sides. We go a little bit thicker down here in the bottom, and we just kind of bring it down a little bit to a point. And again, that's I've been shaping my beard up with that sucker. Again, good product. So if you guys want to check out any of their products to scape up your man.
There you go. They're gonna steal it.
That's right.
Trademark that.
You can check them out at manscaped.com. The promo code for the offer is Jiu-Jitsu20. That'll save you 20% off the order. You'll get free shipping, and it helps support the podcast. Also, guys, if you want to support the podcast directly, you can do so by going to our Patreon website, patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. After you become a member, you'll get access to some exclusive content, including a special bonus package of a seminar that I did with gi and no-gi techniques, a stretching sort of activation warm-up routine that Eugene put together specifically for Jiu-Jitsu people. And then you get access to a exclusive library that has everything from little segments with each one of the guests that we've had on. Also, we have things like that again, just there's a lot of things on there actually that if you guys have bought some of my products, there's a lot of YouTube videos that never make it. Like they basically become, I guess you'd say, the B-roll. Like they never make it to the actual, like for whatever reason, there's all kinds of different reasons, but they never make it to the actual public YouTube channel. And so there's a lot of videos there. I call them lost videos because they just kind of sit in the back and I don't know what to do with them sometimes. And a lot of those are in there. And those things include everything from like workouts and talking style rambling videos to even rolling sessions that I had with people. And so again, if you guys want to get access to any and all of that, you can do so by going to our Patreon at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. And the last thing to share with you guys, if you're listening to this and it's in the month of March for 2023. Right now, we're doing an early release with our Swollen Roll program. So Swollen Roll is a program that me and my nutrition coach and lifting coach, we put together over the course of the last year. So I started doing this bodybuilding hypertrophy style training a couple of years ago. And at first, I was just doing it because I wanted to look a little better with my clothes off. Since then, it's become my preferred method for lifting because it makes my body feel good. And for me at this point, like I'm not worried about just pure performance. I'm worried about longevity and feeling good. I want to feel good. And also too, I want to look good. I want to look good with my clothes off. And so I've been using the different programs he's put together and also the diet that he's put together. And so we put it together in one program. Now the diet part, I just share this with you. It's not going to give you like every single dieting thing that you need to know, but it will actually give you an inside look at my exact diet down to the gram. So if you want to know exactly what I eat, it'll show you right there. And this was the diet that I was eating to cut weight, which is it's still a massive amount of food. Yeah. And nowadays I eat even more food because I'm trying to actually gain a couple pounds. But again, a really cool program. If you guys want to get on the early release where you'll get access to the content at a discount, you can do so by going to my website at chewjitsutraining.com. So CHEWJITSU training.com. When you go there on the main page, you'll see the Swollen Roll button, so you can click on that. And if for some reason this is much later in the future, because obviously this stuff is on the internet, then you can always get the program later on. It'll be around. And so guys, with that said, thank you so much for being here on the podcast today. Hope you guys had a good time and enjoyed it. And as always, we'll talk to you next time.